Welcome to Module 4, Workplace Supports, the last module in the National Certificate in Employment Services as part of the foundation course. Just a reminder, there are 4 specialty courses that you will be eligible to take, and the 3 specialty courses around mental health services, transition services, and developmental disabilities services. Those 3 specialty courses, any one of those in combination with this foundation course will, upon completion, will qualify you for the ACRE, Association for Community Rehabilitation Educator National Certificate. By completing this certificate, 40 hours of instruction, and approximately 1 year of experience, you will also be eligible to write for what they call the CESP exam through APSE if that happens to be something that you're interested in. Your instructor can provide you with additional information about both national certificates. Okay, as you know, in Module 1 we did an overview of employment services, best practices, and models for delivery and the role of the employment specialist. Since then, we've been kind of tracking the job search process, starting with discovery and assessment, Module 2, employer research and job development for Module 3, and upon securing placement with an employer, this is the next and most and also critical role in the process where we ensure job retention. In this module, we'll be covering how to establish effective entree into the job. We do know that the early stages, the first month or 2 that a person is on the job, makes all the difference in the world in terms of this person feeling comfortable, the employer and coworkers feeling comfortable, so that we can achieve job retention. We need to plan and implement those workplace supports that are necessary. You'll see that what we'll talk about is those workplace supports tend to be a little more intensive in those first few months, and we're big fans of, right from the very beginning, you're kind of planning to fade. You know, how can we incorporate natural supports and move more towards this person receiving supports from coworkers rather than us as professionals, to whatever degree possible. Assisting the employee to learn those new skills, particularly in the beginning, but on an ongoing basis. Everybody in their job needs to continue to learn as they go, learn new skills as they progress over time. The delivery of effective and timely ongoing supports after those first few months of more intensive supports are provided. And then practicing good customer service, service after the sale, if you will, in terms of this person working there. If everything's going well, it's important for us to know that. If everything is not going well, it's very important that we know that as well. And then managing the job of an employment specialist. As you saw in Module 1, you wear a lot of hats, jack of all trades. So we're going to try to give you some techniques, some strategies for managing the work that you do as an employment specialist. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Amy Dwyer to talk about fitting into the workplace.
Thanks, Dale. We talked earlier in an earlier module about how important it is to fit into a workplace as a new employee, and that can often be an area that's difficult for some of the people we represent, but also key to them keeping a job. So we want to really talk about ways that we can help our individuals fit in and be a part of the work team and the work community. It's really important for us to facilitate communications, because that's often where things can fall apart. Help to model the way to communicate with the new employee. If they do communicate in a different manner, direct instruction of the best way to talk to this individual. Sometimes people aren't sure. If somebody has a disability, it has nothing to do with communication, but they still are uncertain as a coworker in what to say or how to say it. So what tends to happen is they just don't approach the individual, so they feel a little isolated. So really trying to facilitate that kind of interaction is important to including them so that it doesn't seem unusual. They're not afraid of it, and that it just becomes commonplace and it will happen more organically. And something that also, a lot of times if there is direct support, like some sort of job coach, I think a lot of coworkers and supervisors think, I'll just talk to the job coach, and then the job coach will talk to the person, and again, that can be isolating as well. So making sure that you understand your role in your job coaching is to facilitate how a supervisor can ask the new employee how to do a task or how a coworker can do that. So they don't just come up to you and say, hey, can you tell Joe to collate these items and put them in our box? And then you turn to Joe and say, Joe, can you collate these items and put them in the box? You can see how silly that is. That instead you step back and say, well, why don't we go together and I'll let you ask Joe, to do this, and then we'll see if Joe has any questions, and facilitate and model that. So that's part of understanding and making the employer understand what is your role as the employment consultant. And you're there not to be necessarily the go-between, but to facilitate the process of helping this person fit in and being a part of a team. And that you're there to support not just that new employee, but to support the coworkers and to support the employer in learning how to work with that new employee. You might do some training of the employee to perform the job, or work with coworkers or a supervisor on how they can train the strategies for success in training this individual, because you'll know this individual so well from all your discovery that you might have some tips for words to say or things to say that will keep them motivated. Assisting the employee in meeting requirements of the job. You need to understand what the requirements are and then make it clear to the new employee and work together as a team to make sure they're meeting all the requirements. And again, back to that building relationships. Again, that's if you can assist the individual at break time to talk about appropriate things or to ask questions of the coworkers. Start a conversation that says, oh, did you know that Joe here, he remembers every actor in every movie he's ever seen. It's an amazing memory. And if people start quizzing him and he'll get them right, and suddenly they kind of have a thing, and you can step out and they've developed, a conversation that could happen again organically or could be passed on. So it's planting those little seeds and making sure that, that somebody can socially engage to the best of his or her ability and fit in again. So the other thing is to demonstrate professional behavior, because you represent a business that has negotiated this agreement, and also to model for the new employee. You're doing that both. If it's a company that is a professional company, some sort of office, and you're dressed in that way, and you're not loud and you're engaging in conversation appropriately, the new employee is going to recognize that that's something that he or she should do as well. Teaching the employee the necessary communication skills. What is the best way to talk to individuals, to your boss, to your coworkers within that work environment? So specific to that area. Make observations. What's the best way for Joe to ask for a day off? What's the best way to ask if somebody would like to join him for lunch? All that kind of stuff. Observe and see what goes on and how things occur naturally, and then teach Joe to follow suit. Develop a workplace supports plan, which we're going to talk about. This really tracks what kinds of support does the new employee need, who can provide them, how do they work, do they cost anything, when do they occur, just to keep track. So if something comes up and support isn't working, it can be adjusted. If somebody else comes in to help support, sometimes that happens, a different job coach, a different support person, they can pick up this plan and know what's already in place. And too often we see, oh, we sent a different job coach, and they have no information. They arrive at the job. They're like, oh, I guess I'll just help you. What do you need? It's much more, it runs more smoothly if you have an actual plan that everybody can look at. Know how to anticipate problems. So you have worked with this individual doing a lot of discovery. You will know what triggers some not so favorable behavior. So if you see something like that coming, you know to switch it. When I had a young man who would act completely differently around females, could not function. So I just knew that he couldn't be partnered with, a female and be successful. So I had to find him a job where the majority of the people he worked with were male. And if I get the call that I don't know what's happening with Kevin, he's acting so he's not really doing his job today, my first question is there a new staff person or did he get paired with somebody new? And if they say, well, yes, Lisa, I know exactly what's going on and let the employer know that's not gonna be the best for Kevin. So, and then be creative when you're trying to solve problems. A lot of times you just have to work through things and talk to other stakeholders and see if they've experienced issues and what are their solutions then. So being part of the team requires fitting in socially. So learning what's acceptable and what's normal as a workplace. And all workplaces are different. Cracking jokes during the middle of the day might be perfectly fine and might be the norm, at the pizza restaurant. But at a different restaurant that's a little higher end, you don't stop in the middle of the day and crack a joke. Or in the law office during certain times, you don't. So you need to understand when is it okay and explain that and model that for the new employee. Prior to taking the job, and we talked about this, make sure the workplace culture matches that job seeker's personality, because you cannot expect this new employee to completely change who they are. If you try over and over, it's just not going to work. You can make some adaptations, but you can't change what's going to happen. It's their default. We've had difficult situations where there was a young man with Tourette's who also, when he had his tics, he would shout out obscenities and tried everything to, concentrate on not saying an obscenity. So then he wouldn't do his work because he was afraid the next time he'd have a tic, it would be an obscenity. If he didn't do that, he would shout out obscenities. And then it kind of became his thing. So we finally had to think, where is it okay to shout out obscenities during the day? And you will not get fired. And so came up with behind the scenes at the Mack Truck Mechanics Center, where the big trucks on the East Coast come through, and the truck stops and needs to get tires changed or engines tuned or brakes done. It's a bunch of really manly men guys, and the guys who drive their trucks are manly men drivers, and they come in, and if he shouts out a profanity of some kind, they high-five him. It's not a big deal at all. And then they ended up fading even. But it fit right into the work culture, and we matched it, and he had a good job being an assistant to the back of the mechanics behind the scenes. On the job, learn what triggers good behavior and bad. Try to remove the things that trigger the bad behavior, increase the things that trigger the good behavior, and just create opportunities for more good triggers. You have to create fewer opportunities for those bad things to occur. And if you know what those are, like the young man who didn't perform well near females, if you had to work directly with them, try to stop that from happening. Create positive consequences for good behavior, negative consequences for bad behavior, so that it just becomes natural for them to be a part of the community. And after you do this for a while, it will become natural. I had a young lady that I worked with who did a fabulous job. She was definitely on the spectrum, so she didn't like to make eye contact with people. She wasn't very sociable, but she was working with a series of people doing tagging, pricing, organizing in the back of a stockroom, and it was a family-owned operation. And she actually was making people look bad. She worked so well. She didn't even want to stop for breaks. But they finally came to me and said, we tried to say hi to her. She won't talk to us. I don't think she likes us. And it's important for her to like us because we're a big family here. So I had to, they certainly didn't want to fire her. She did her job, but she wasn't fitting in. So I worked really hard on having everybody wear a name tag and letting Teresa know that she needed to, every morning, greet everybody and say their name. So we tried that, and I said, well, she's saying it, but she won't even look us in the eye. So I had to say, Teresa, we have another part of your job they're going to add to this. Now I want you to say good morning, say their name, and look them in the eye. And at first when she did that, she'd read their name, say good morning, and then stare at them. It was a little awkward. So we had to work on just look at them quickly, Teresa, and say their name. So it was this whole process over a couple of months. But over time, we didn't need the name tag. She said good morning. She looked people in the eye, and it was much more natural to her, and they felt much better, like Teresa likes us now. Now, it had nothing to do with her job, but I think it had everything to do with her keeping that job. She now fit in a little better. You know, she knew everybody's name because she was forced to. What was funny is Teresa did say to me, it was all these new job tasks I was giving her, was she getting a raise for all this, which I thought was funny. So there are things that you have to do just to help somebody keep a job, and fitting in is really key. You know, are they being invited to the company picnic, to the holiday party, and are they behaving appropriately in those things? So they are a part of that. Your first activity is activity 4.1, fitting into the workplace. When you go there are a list of things that we've talked about here about how an employment consultant can facilitate somebody fitting into the workplace, some different ideas. Then there are a series of questions, just 3 questions on the second page that you're going to post onto a discussion board and then respond to at least 2 other people, just to get a discussion going about any activities or strategies that you have already used in the past or that you think would work, and get the discussion going. Describe activities that maybe haven't worked so well and get a discussion going so we can see some ideas from people who've been doing it for a little while, or just give ideas to try for somebody who does have someone on a workplace that needs some of these solutions. So planning for workplace supports. What are supports and accommodations? An accommodation is really any strategy that lessens the effect of a challenge or a barrier. And when doing that, it helps people feel more confident. They show that they're more competent and therefore feel more comfortable in a work setting. So, and part of this is don't forget to include the family in this conversation. There might be stuff that occurs at home or when they're with them that they could make suggestions about. And if you're trying a support on the job, maybe try it at home as well so that there is some consistency. I think what's important here is a job coach is not an accommodation. A job coach might provide an accommodation, but a job coach is not the accommodation. A job coach is there to provide either prompting or to stay focused or whatever it is. But whatever it is that the job coach is providing, that is the accommodation. That's what needs to be tracked, because we might be able to find ways where it can naturally be supported in the workplace and a job coach doesn't have to provide it. It's really key to track those accommodations and know exactly what those supports are. So who needs workplace supports? Obviously, that job seeker who becomes a new employee. They're going to need some supports. They're the one making the big transition into the workplace. But coworkers, perhaps they've never worked with an individual with a disability, or a coworker adjusting to any new employee that's a new person to their team might need some supports with that. Supervisors. Sometimes the supervisor will say, I don't know how to supervise somebody with a disability. Say, well, you know, absolutely, you know how to supervise people, and all people are different, and they do things differently, and you have those skills. That's why you're a supervisor, and offering support to them to show them that it's no different, you know, for a person with a disability. And customers, if someone is working in a customer service position, might need a little support in working directly with this new employee. So these are all people who might need supports from you, might need your services, and might need some national support. And when might these supports be needed? During the recruitment search, application interview process, during the hiring process, and at any point, the ADA allows for somebody to ask for support at any point during the employment process. So just to fill out the application, if you need support, you can ask for an accommodation. If you don't need an accommodation for the application, you don't need an accommodation for the interview, you can go through the whole hiring process without an accommodation, then you don't even have to disclose that you have a disability and ask for one. If you get on the job and 2 months in, you realize that you need a support, something with a disability, or a job seeker suddenly needs a support, at that point, you can go and ask for an accommodation. So it might be during orientation or initial training. It might just be for social inclusion, which was that young lady I just talked about. She did her job fine. She was great at her job. It was that she needed support in the social inclusion area. For the stabilization period, that 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, there might be support just to make sure that everything is working the way it's supposed to. Maybe even during performance appraisal, the supervisor might need assistance. I'm not sure how to do this performance appraisal with this individual. They do their job slightly differently. Could I, get some assistance or some guidance in that? Advancement, if someone is going to get a promotion, might need to come back in and offer some support so they can adjust. This is yet a new transition. Job separation or termination. Supervisor might need some support. I've had supervisors say, can you just, tell them not to come in tomorrow because it's not working. It's like, no, you need to go through the process of firing this individual because it's legitimate, and you need to explain why, and let me help you with that. And at any time that a change or a problem occurs, that's when support is needed. And as long as you make it known that that's your role with this placement, that you can come and help and problem solve, and please contact me. When a change or a problem occurs, it won't necessarily be such a scary or a tragic event. They will call the employment specialist and work it out together. So from here, I'm going to pass this back on to Dale, who's going to talk a little bit about negotiating the customized job.
Thanks, Amy. Negotiating customized jobs. You'll probably remember that we did spend a fair amount of time in Module 3 talking about negotiating customized jobs. Why this is in the workplace support section is because it's a customized job. The systems that a company uses to orient and train those new employees is going to be different because this is a job that they're not used to filling. It was part of the employment specialist role to kind of negotiate this new set of refined job tasks that make up the customized job. So the role of the person, either the job coach or the employment specialist that then supports a customized job, has to be a little bit more front and centered. It has to be something that has to be supported. And one of the first things that's important is that if the employment specialist that negotiated the job is not the same as the job coach or employment specialist that supports them on the job, is that those benefits to the employer of the customized job need to be something that is communicated and that the new employee, the job coach, is aware of, because those are the things that have to be reinforced once the person is in this new customized job. The job duties in terms of how and when customized jobs are beneficial to employers is listed below. These are the same that we did talk about in Module 3. But again, these are examples that the job coach who's providing those supports needs to keep in mind. If it's a standard job, the key is to ask, how do you train everybody else? What is the orientation process? How much training do people get? And what's important is that we don't take over all of the orientation and training of this person because they have a disability. We want that employer to give the same level of orientation and training to the person that we're placing as they would to anybody else that's new on the job doing those same tasks. So it's important to understand what is that level of orientation and training. And why that's important, you might say, well, that's a service that we provide. We supplement their training, and that's true. but we want them to be as engaged with the person that we work with as they would be with anybody else. We don't want them to be considered a special case, if you will. But as Amy mentioned earlier, in another scenario, maybe the training is going to take a little bit longer for them to feel comfortable and oriented into the job. So that's where we don't want them to have to do an unnecessary burden of training because they're going to be taking longer. That's where our role would come in. So find out what's in place now and then supplement, complement that. And then, of course, if it's a customized job, we probably do need to either coach coworkers and supervisors on how to support them in this different set of job tasks, and or we might have to play a more active role. Key to that supporting the entree of this person into the work site is this notion of understanding the job site and the job that this person is going to be engaged in. In some cases, it's appropriate that the job coach or employment specialist go in a day early or a little bit early to kind of learn about this before the person actually starts. And part of that is done by partnering with those supervisors and coworkers and understanding the policies and the procedures. Again, we don't want to make this person a special case. So what are those things so that we can dovetail and fit into how they provide their training and support? Know the hours, know the conditions of that employment, including benefits, salary, and how folks are paid. And we've talked about it a lot because it is important. What is the culture here? And really kind of ask some probing questions, you know. And Amy gave just a good example just a few minutes ago in terms of, you know, is this a place where people welcome this notion we're going to joke around and have a little fun while we do this? Or is that the sort of thing that is left for when we're taking a break or having lunch together? Analyze the specific aspects of the job in terms of tasks that need to be done and what supports and accommodations might be needed. Learn all aspects of the job. Sometimes you'll come in, you'll say, this is what we have to do. You're assuming that they have to do those jobs, tasks every day. Well, that might be what they do on Tuesday. Wednesdays when the truck comes in with supplies and it's all hands on deck and everybody has to help unload the truck and stock. So know what all aspects of the job, which includes do the job tasks change from day to day. Determine the most effective way for the job seeker to perform those jobs, and then provide your supports and training accordingly. You need to, when you're analyzing the job, that analysis needs to consist of the job tasks, those academic and skills that are required to do it, machinery and equipment that's necessary, characteristics as well. And again, these are done when we're in that job development mode, but we're doing it from the standpoint of creating a job match. Once the job match is established and there's an agreement to hire this person, that analysis needs to be even a little bit more specific in those categories that I just put up there. When you're analyzing the job, look at who they associate with, both employees and supervisors. I would also add to that list customers. Is there a lot of customer interaction, infrequent customer interaction, or none whatsoever? All things that you need to keep in mind. There's a great resource, 4.3, that talks about, it's an article on knowing the job site and the job, and we recommend that you look at that when you're getting to know what needs to be done. When it comes to job now, analyzing the targeted job, there's a resource 4.4 on task analysis, which gives you some real specific ways to analyze jobs in ways that you could then translate into the supports and training that you're planning to provide. There's also a tool, 4.5, that's a task checklist, and it's in picture form. So what that does is kind of give you a sample, an example, or a model of how you can structure a job, and you can do so when communicating that verbally is not going to be the best medium for this person to learn it. So setting up a set of pictures for some folks might be the right prop or tool that they need to kind of keep them on task. So we want to give you an example of that. Talk with coworkers, talk with managers in terms of what are their expectations, how receptive are they on the job supports. What we find is some employers say, we do all of our own training. We want that to also apply to the people that we work with, but in fact, after discussing it further, there might be some agreement that you're going to need to supplement that to some degree based on the needs of the new employee. Again, culture and environment are important. How can this person best fit in? What do these folks like to do on an ongoing basis when they're not working but still associating with each other? Do they get together after work? Do people bring in a cake for somebody else's birthday? Do people bring in a cake when it's their birthday? All very important cultural things that you want to know to help this person fit in as well as is possible. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Amy to talk about workplace support strategies.
Thanks, Dale. I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the strategies that we have used in the past to help somebody be successful. And I'm sure you have a lot of your own examples as well. But sometimes you need to analyze what is the difficulty, what is the problem that a person is experiencing, and then be creative about the solution. So if somebody, for instance, is having difficulty with time management, so they have difficulty completing work within a specified time period, don't have a sense of time, and can't seem to stay focused, sometimes what has worked is some self-monitoring. So using a timer and a chart, which gives them another task like, oh my gosh, this chart is only halfway done, and look at how much time I have left. I have to pick up the pace. There's lots of good apps on smartphones now or iPads that can actually support this as well, giving instant feedback. Another common difficulty is maybe the employee has difficulty discriminating between work supplies. There's just slight differences, and maybe picture cues could help. So a picture cue of the work task in each container, or a picture of the person doing the job holding the specific supply that they need, so that they can just match it, and sometimes that will work. Some other examples, quality. If the employee is not meeting production standards, what can you do? And they have the ability to. Maybe some form of reinforcement, providing feedback hourly, asking the employee to assist with, in this case, it was a young lady doing some behind-the-scenes restaurant work and wasn't focused and was distracted a lot by what's going on in the front end. So giving some positive reinforcement. When you have finished your work, if you would like to come out to the front end and assist the greeter as part of it, because that's something they enjoy doing, then you can do that. So it was positive reinforcement. So that's, in doing something like that, it's very key for the employment specialist to be a part of that, because they know the individual so well and know what might be reinforcing to them, or at least can contact the family and say, this is the issue we're having. What does he or she really like? What would be a good reinforcement? Some people, just a paycheck, they don't understand the concept of money in that way. So paycheck is typically the natural reinforcement. Sometimes we have to come up with others. Another difficulty, reading instructions. Employee has difficulty reading the copy request or to determine what their work assignment is. You could tape them or have it read to, sometimes have the employer read them to them rather than just write it down. Remembering a task. Sometimes just remembering, I had a young lady who needed to refill a lot of all the different condiments in the condiment bar, or like a salad bar item, and just didn't know when to do it. But we would place a piece of colored tape on the inside of the metal bowl, the insert, and as soon as she would see like the hot pink tape appear, she'd know, okay, we have to put more cottage cheese in because I can see the hot pink and I should never see the hot pink. So it was just a visual reminder to her. Time management, difficulty taking breaks on time. That young lady who we had to use the name tags for, she would not take breaks. She would just keep working through, and she had trouble with that. So at that point, we used like a wristwatch that had an alarm, or there's your iPhone having an alarm set up just to go, okay, when that alarm goes off, I know they'll take a break, because on their own, they're not watching the clock. A lot of employees do watch the clock, and sometimes we get people who don't watch the clock, but for whatever reason, union says you have to take a certain break at certain hours. So that's an idea. So when you're coming up with a plan, it's good to know, what are the issues, what needs to be supported, and then include in the plan, why is the support needed? Because they're not reaching productivity, or because she's not taking her break when she's supposed to, and union rules say she has to take the 15-minute break. So you know what your why is. Who needs the support? The new employee. Does the supervisor need a support or need to be part of the support? Is it a coworker who's prompting them on the hour? Is it the family member who needs to come up with a strategy or help them set their watch in the morning for 3 different alarm times? Who needs the help with the support? What are the strategies for implementing the support? Who's going to set that watch? Is it, a coworker first thing when they get there? Is it mom at home? Figuring that out. Who is responsible for delivering the support? Is it a job coach? Is it sort of a national support? Is it the individual themselves who's self-monitoring? Record that. When do you begin implementing the support in the schedule? Is it always needed? Is it just on a day where somebody's working more than 4 hours? When is this support needed and who starts it? And then, of course, the cost of the support. If it's some sort of assistive technology, who's going to pay for that? If it's a transportation issue and they need mobility, who's going to pay for that? Is it something they can get funding for? Is it something they pay for with their paycheck and mom helps them? What are the details of that workplace support plan? So we're going to ask you to do an activity with the workplace support plan development, activity 4.2. When you go through this activity, you will see 10 different scenarios for accommodation. It will set up, somebody's having an issue. What we ask you to do, and attached to this is some workplace support plan forms, blank. We're going to ask you to pick 3 of those scenarios and complete a workplace support plan for those 3 case studies, 3 of the 10, and turn that into your instructor. Just to get practice with what does this form look like. It's a simple 1-page form, and there's blank ones in your resources. And it just asks you why they're needed, who needs the support, what are the strategies, who's responsible, the dates, what is the schedule of visits to make sure they're working okay, the cost, and the payment source. So that's what you're looking for in a workplace support plan. Then from there, we're going to ask you to do an assignment, more of a field-based assignment. And in 4.1, we're going to ask you to complete a workplace support plan for a current customer. So it's either a customer that you have that's already been placed on a job somewhere, or a customer who's been working on a job for a while, and perhaps you have a coworker who has an employee who's been working for a while. And go and observe and work with that employment specialist and work with the individual and complete this workplace support plan on an actual individual. And it is helpful, too, if you have someone who's just starting a job or is relatively new to a job, because you're going to have to do this anyway, get some sort of plan or idea, figure out accommodations. So there's a blank form in there for you to complete and then turn into your instructor.
Amy, I want to jump in here. So with this assignment, too, if you're not a person that provides workplace supports on an ongoing basis, you might be wondering, okay, how can I do this if I don't have a caseload for whom I provide workplace supports? That's where your mentor and I think particularly your supervisor would really come in. So again, it's field-based work, so we want you to do something that is related to the work that either you do or the work that your organization is responsible for. But you might need a little help. Your instructor, if you're still kind of stuck, your instructor can help you as well. You can fit in and kind of maybe somebody else is providing that support, but then you agree after putting, or in the process of putting this workplace support plan together, that you're going to cover the job coaching for a particular person that's already in a job. And it doesn't have, I mean, Amy is right, if it's somebody relatively new, that there's a lot of creativity that goes into those early stages of developing a workplace support plan and thinking about all those categories in the workplace support plan to make sure they're all addressed. But it can also just be somebody that maybe there's a lot of fading that has gone on, and now the person's, you know, relatively independent in terms of being on that job. One of the things that you'll hear about at the end of this module is you really do need to check back. You need to kind of be back in there. It's a good business practice for both the employer and for the person that's working there. So maybe that's the role you play, is to kind of that periodic check-in. And what we find is, you know, people are always in a position to maybe learn new things as they're growing into that job. So find a person that maybe is on that, has that potential to learn some new things. Go in, talk to the employer, talk to the employee, and come up with a workplace support plan that would help this person develop a new skill that maybe in the past they haven't been responsible for. So those are all possibilities, and I'm suggesting that for the folks that, you know, may not, job coaching and workplace supports may not be a normal part of what it is they do. Thank you, Amy.
All right, no, thank you. That's a good point. There are people in the audience going, I don't work directly with individuals who just got placed. So it's good to observe, and it's good to recognize the strategies that go into that and the creativity that goes into coming up with supports. And not all supports that, you know, an individual has had in the past will work in a work setting. You have to come up with a combination that works for the employee as well as for the environment, and it doesn't interrupt or intrude in any way. So you really do have to be creative. And which leads us right into, if you're doing the follow-along support, which typically, traditionally has been a job coach, I think those roles are changing now, and having job coaches becoming more of a consultant on the job, not doing, let me sit down next to this employee and make sure that they're doing the job or do the job with them. More away from that and toward a general consultant role, which is part of the bigger business model. So what does an effective consultant do? And these, as staff supporting a new employee on the job, what are your main goals? And these are actually strategies that were pulled from a for-profit consulting group, Arthur Anderson, who goes into businesses who have purchased new software, human resources software, or data collection software, and employees go in and train the entire staff on how to use this, make sure it fits in and then fade out. So this was pulled from them, and it's exactly what job coaches as consultants can do. First, you conduct an inventory of the internal expertise. You need to know of all that, the coworkers and the staff, who does what. And by expertise, it's who's responsible for what. And it's also, you will recognize who connects best with your new employee. Because if you want to use some sort of natural support, somebody to really help and assist or to prompt or to keep somebody focused, you want to go with the person who most naturally seems to fall into that role. So that's conducting an inventory. It's making observations and taking note of who does what. Assessing the organizational needs. What is it that this individual needs to do to fit into this team and produce the outcome that's required of somebody hired for this position? You need to communicate new ideas or clarify old ones. So communicate how this person might do this job slightly differently. Communicate with others on how they can talk and interact with this individual. Facilitate decision-making and planning. We ultimately want our new employees to be able to problem solve and make decisions. And if an issue comes up on the job, we want the supervisors and the coworkers to say, all right, we can solve this too. you know, we're working with this individual, this is our company, this is our department, and we have some ideas too. You want to help them be a part of the accommodation process. You also want to demonstrate new techniques. As with Arthur Anderson, they need to demonstrate how to use this new software. You're going to demonstrate to the new employee how to do this job, which might be new to them. You will also demonstrate how to work with this individual with a disability, demonstrate those strategies to all the coworkers and to the supervisor, and then instruct in these new techniques. You're not just instructing the new job seeker, you're also instructing all of the coworkers and all the supervisors in the best way to supervise and interact with the new employee. And then you want to walk away and watch them do it for themselves so that they no longer use you as the intermediary to talk to this new employee, that they are now feeling competent and comfortable and confident to go right up to Joe and have a conversation with him and ask him to do a new task, and they know how to do it. And that your job seeker, the new employee, it has the same feeling if they need to ask for some help, that they don't go to you to ask. Can you go ask my supervisor for some help on this? So they know how to go directly to them and appropriately ask for that help. That's what you're trying to model and you're trying to get them to do. And the constant follow-up after the service, following up with the new employee, following up with the supervisor, checking in on the coworkers, making sure that everything is running smoothly. You want to support the staff as business liaison. That is your role there, to make sure everything runs smoothly. But you're in a professional role. So on the job support staff, there's a couple of things that I'm recommending you not do that I've seen in the past. And this is something where you might disagree with me on a couple of these. You might have a situation, a specific circumstance where you would disagree, and that's fine. This is a general discussion. You should not do the job for or with the employee. If this has been a good job match, these are skills that this new employee should have. Now, in the beginning, to model and to help, that's part of the training. But if once they're past their training period and support staff is still necessary sitting next to them doing part of their job in order for them to be productive, then it probably wasn't a good job match. Create separate training orientation processes just for the new employee that they're supporting. Should always try to follow the typical training and orientation and then just provide supports within that. Don't pull this person out separately. Don't just follow the employee around, because again, that will not help facilitate a natural interaction with coworkers. They'll constantly go through the support staff to talk to them if that support staff is always just following them around. Don't eat lunch with the employee separate from everybody else, which I've seen a lot. You can eat lunch with the employee to help facilitate social relationships. I gave that example earlier of, you know, throwing out a conversation topic that you know this new employee, your former job seeker, knows something about or can contribute. You know, throwing this up to try to facilitate some interaction. Then that's purposeful, pretty much. It's the we just eat lunch separately from everybody else. Again, isolates the individual. Trying to blend in with the other employees, like, I'm just one of the workers here. That's not your role. You are a professional that works for an organization, and you have a purpose for being there. You are a business liaison that's helping the transition for this new employee. You're a problem solver. You are available for questions, and you are there to facilitate the transition to this new job. So you have a specific role there. They know that you're not an employee, that you come from an organization that supports them as well as this new person. A few more other things you should not do is just stay to the side and read a book. I've seen that where it's like required that they go to the job with them and they're sitting over the side reading a book. That does not. If you're sitting inside and reading a book, that means you don't need to be there. The person is completely independent at that point, so that doesn't look very professional. They should not do anything for the employee that the employee is capable of doing for him or herself, even with support. Sometimes it is easier to do something for somebody. As a parent, you know, if you're a parent, you've experienced that. You got to get out the door and make stuff like, can I just tie the shoe for you? Kid will never learn to tie their shoe. But it's frustrating when you're waiting and they are slowly tying their shoe and it's not working, but that's the only way they can learn. So keeping up with that and backing off when you know somebody can do it and it's part of their learning process. The support staff should not avoid contact with the supervisor and coworkers. You need to make yourself available to them. At the same time, don't monopolize the time of the supervisor or coworker. You don't work there. So you need to be cognizant of the value of their time and ask for, when they need you, they will come to contact, check in on them, but you're not hanging out with your friends by working there. Some of the things that support staff should do is facilitate as many natural supports as they can, facilitate conversations, ways of doing new things, travel training, skill development. They should really be there observing the environment and figuring out the best way for somebody to do their job within that environment. Should definitely offer support to the supervisors and coworkers. Make yourself available to them. If you have questions, if this isn't working, or if you have an idea for how, Joe can even do something better, please, let's talk about it. That's my role. Observe employees on the job and the surroundings and make recommendations to the supervisors about new tasks or changes in tasks. If you see that Joe can do so much more than he's doing and maybe they didn't realize and you have some data to prove it, then you can approach the supervisor and say, I have some, if you need this done, I feel Joe can do this, and we can get him up to speed. You should provide supports while maintaining the typical job training and orientation. So be a part of the orientation and the training process in order to support everybody, but let that person go through that training with all new employees. And then manipulate the environment as needed. And by manipulate, I don't mean manipulate people, but if the desk is too low for somebody's wheelchair, let's see, can we just prop it up with something and, make it a little bit higher? Right, now there's no issue. So observing and seeing how you can have a quick fix on some issues within the work site. You need to recognize that you are the face of your organization's employment services. So positive, every time you're there, you're marketing for them. So you want to look professional. You want to be clear on your services. You are the face of the organization. That's what they see. That's the impression they're going to have of your whole organization based on what you do. You should coach the new employee in soft skills. Help them with that, how to ask for help, going to break on time. All those soft skills that aren't necessarily written in a job description, but again, help you fit in or not fit in. You should be seen as this business consultant. They can come to you and you will problem solve. You can help propose moving appropriate interns from volunteer to paid if you're within some progressive employment sites, or some work-based learning or something like that where someone isn't getting paid, but you have the data to show somebody can do the job, and can reach productivity and would be an asset to that company. This is the time, to make that proposal. And if you're the follow-along person who's separate from the original job developer or employment specialist who made the proposal, work with that individual and let them know there's chances for advancement. And work closely with all the employment specialists. If the follow-along person is a different person than the initial employment specialist, work together as a team, because now you are the eyes and the ears on that site where that person is working. There might be more opportunities for other people. There might be openings elsewhere that you hear about. You can expand the network. There's a lot of good information that you now have being on a work site. We made a lot of references to national support, and just wanted to throw out there, what is a national support? And everybody might have an idea of, what a national support is, and what a definition is. And it's really, anything that occurs naturally in an environment. And a lot of people respond like a coworker is a national support, and that is very true. That's a great example. A coworker is somebody who's already there doing the job as well. If we cannot bring in another outside person, to provide a support, but this coworker can do it, that's great. It's a little more natural, a little more organic. It doesn't have to be a person, however. Some examples of natural supports, one that I had mentioned in an earlier module, when I color-coded the room that had all the forms, the shelves with all the forms, I introduced that to the environment. Before they were just all written out in their, medical titles, I introduced the coding system, the sheet, and everybody, it saved everybody time, and they loved it. So it became a natural part of how everybody in the office did that work. So if it is a support for your specific new employee that helps everybody, then that suddenly becomes natural to the environment. If it just helps that individual but it doesn't interfere with anybody else, you raise their desk and their desk is 5 inches taller than everybody else's, but that isn't a problem, doesn't affect anybody else, then that's a natural support. That's something that helps that person do their job better because their wheelchair fits better under the desk and they can reach everything, and it doesn't hurt anybody else, then that's a natural support. So there's lots of examples of what a natural support is. I'm going to pause here and let Dale talk to you a little bit about how do you assist an employee in learning some of the new skills that they need to be productive on the job.
Thanks, Amy. Assisting employees to learn new skills. A very important part of helping that person fit in. Once they learn how to do things that they don't know how to do, they're upping their game. They are making a better and more noticeable contribution to that particular employer. A common technique for that is using a systematic instructional process, which consists of teaching those new skills in a consistent manner and taking the tasks that need to be done and breaking it down into teachable steps. Providing frequent and varied practice, and keeping a record of what is being learned. That's what makes it systematic. And it's instructional because you're helping that person understand and you're able to observe. They're getting steps 1, 2, but they're getting hung up on 3. And then one of the key things I think in terms of, in general, what a job coach or a person that provides supports in the workplace does is really appreciate the fact that sometimes it's not the person that can't do the job, it's we aren't coming up with the right ways to teach them. And so when you break this down into manageable, smaller, bite-sized steps, it allows you to assess, analyze, how is the person doing and how am I doing in terms of teaching them? Why is it that they got steps 1 through 3 or they're stuck on 3? Maybe I need to teach that a little bit different, or maybe I've got to break that step down even further because there's a couple of things that they have to do and they're messing up on one aspect of it. The tracking, the recording of that is also a really important thing because then if it is systemic and this person's in the process of learning it, and that happens over a period of time, then from day 4 to day 5, you can kind of see how this person is doing over time. You can see how you're doing over time in terms of teaching them. And then if there is going to be any kind of substitution of another coach or employment specialist that's going to step in, that documentation allows them to kind of pick up where you left off. Assisting the employee that learns those new skills, it fosters learning in the workplace where the skills take place, because it's one thing, again, to teach somebody to do something elsewhere, but how it's done there could, in fact, be very different. What is their learning style? Well, maybe one of the things that you've observed is when you showed them, they tend to get it quicker than when you explain it to them, or vice versa. Showing them doesn't seem to make any difference, but explaining to them and maybe having them explain it back is a better way for them to get it. So you've got to kind of tweak that, learn about them, learn about yourself in terms of how you best can teach them, And those steps allow you to assess them as well as yourself as the instructor. Use accepted methods of doing the tasks in the work setting. So even though you might say, this is a quicker way to do it, I don't know why we have to tell 3 people that I've finished this job, where in fact within that particular work setting, that's the way they do it, and those 3 people need to be informed. If that's what it is for other employees, that's what it needs to be for the person that we're working with. And discussing these steps. So one of the things that we just are suggesting, if you haven't been involved in systematic instructional processes before, is think about you learning to do something on your cell phone. Maybe it's entering an appointment into the calendar on your cell phone. You know, it's kind of intuitive. You pick up the phone, you hit certain buttons, and you know, and even if you haven't done it before, you just kind of intuitively kind of figure it out. And cell phones are pretty good that way, to kind of not have to have big, thick manuals in order to be able to use them. But why don't you, instead of doing it intuitively, really kind of think about what would be the first step? What is the second step? And by kind of forcing yourself to kind of break that down instead of just doing it, you are in fact engaged in developing a systematic instruction process. So you can apply it to yourself, you can practice on yourself, and sometimes that's the best way to kind of become more comfortable before you're going to start teaching employees in the workplace some new skills. There is a form that we have. We've got lots of tools in this course. One is tool 4.6, which is that job analysis form. And that is something that you could also use to kind of document, track progress, or break those steps down. Providing ongoing supports, we're shifting from that notion of those more intense types of things, the new skill acquisition that new employees have to have when they start the job. We talked about fading. One of the things that we think is important is that your workplace supports plans change over time. And that change is necessary because you are incorporating natural supports, and that person is starting to be able to do some of those things more independently. So the workplace support plan needs to change. What also consciously thinking about if and how should I fade from providing these supports. At some point, you're going to shift from those more intensive supports to more ongoing. Sometimes you would maintain a regular contact with that employer and that employee, but in other cases, fading might mean that you're not going to come there but for a check-in on a periodic basis. And a lot of times the funding sources do kind of dictate how often those check-ins need to be. So now you've got to kind of say, what is it going to take to ensure that this person stays employed long-term if that's their wish? And so assisting them to perform those new duties sometimes comes into play. So if everybody's aware, okay, we're asking this person to do something we haven't asked them to do before. Does that employer, does that supervisor, does that employee know that that's a good time to be contacting you? Or that's a good question that you need to be asking both parties. Are you wanting this person to learn something new? That can re-engage in more active supports when those new tasks need to be done. Or do they need to learn it differently or relearn it in some form or fashion? Maybe there's an area that they are performing poorly. So we have to kind of relearn it because maybe the first time wasn't providing enough detail and some of the quality aspects of what it is they're doing are not being addressed. And then there's always going to be problem-solving issues that occur in the workplace. One of the most common is their supervisor changes. Maybe they're still within the company, so no one thinks much about it, but in fact they're not supervising that person, and maybe they were getting a lot of natural supports and cues from that person, and then all of a sudden this person's performance might be going down. Even if it isn't, maybe a check-in to say to that new supervisor. Because sometimes they won't say anything, and then what you find out is they're kind of uncomfortable with the situation. They weren't involved with the original negotiation of this placement. And so all of a sudden, you know, the person's gone. The person's let go. They've downsized, and this person's part of that. Sometimes that's because of changes in the workplace that we're not aware of. So again, really kind of creating that expectation that people need to bring you in, and also very importantly, checking in periodically, asking these types of questions. Are they needing to learn new jobs? Do we need to relearn some skills? Are there some problems that have presented themselves? So that they know that's an important role that you play, and they need to keep you in the loop. Making sure that both the employee are meeting those set expectations. And are those expectations changing over time? Which leads us to kind of reviewing performance. Determining the employer's satisfaction with both you as the employment specialist, the employee, determining additional or different support needs that might be needed, and determining satisfaction by family members, coworkers, the VR counselor, and other kind of support coordinators. So that needs to be done, you know, not overdoing it, but on a periodic basis. Conducting on-site observations to evaluate performance. It's one thing to call, and I think that's okay that on occasion you call to check in. But if that is your main method because the person seems to be doing particularly well, make sure that you do actually physically stop in, because you could be getting, oh, everything's fine, everything's fine. Maybe you're talking to the wrong person who thinks everything is fine. Maybe some coworkers are very unhappy with the situation. Maybe they've taken over too much of that person's job duties, and there could be some discord in the workplace. Sometimes getting on site is the only way that you're going to be able to observe those sorts of things. So stopping in, making observations, asking around, all very important, at least on a periodic basis. And again, good record keeping, because especially if you're not in there on a regular basis, that documentation allows you to kind of pick up where you left off. Or if somebody else is taking over that responsibility, there's some documentation that allows them to ask more and better pointed questions about how are things going at that particular workplace. We're also going to ask you under Activity 4.2 to kind of think about customer service stars, a discussion about great and terrible customer services experiences and why. That makes for an interesting conversation. You know, we've all experienced, I know we've all experienced poor customer service, and that can be informational. You know, putting ourselves in other people's shoes can help us be better, provide better customer service ourselves. But also, you know, where has it gone particularly well? Who has gone over and above the call of duty, and why? And what kind of an impression did that leave on you? Those are great lessons to take in to the work that we do. We have two very important customers, those job seekers and employees, as well as those employers. And we want to be sure that they are getting the quality of customer service that they deserve. When you do talk about great and terrible customer service, in those examples, try to be real specific, because those were the best lessons that you can get out of that. Write that up and submit that to the instructor for feedback. Things to consider is how sensitive were they to the issues that were taking place? How resilient were they if the problem wasn't solved right away? Did somebody take some initiative? Usually with good customer service, what you're seeing is a good positive attitude. So those are all things that you can keep in mind when you're thinking about those examples and you're writing up that activity. Support for the employer. How well are we listening? They're our partner. If we're successful with them, we can use them as a reference. In some cases, we can get additional placements. We can use those sites for work experiences, job shadows, work site tours. It's very important that they're satisfied with our work, because if they are and they communicate that to you, we're more likely to maintain that positive working relationship, and we can make those resources available to other people that are on our caseloads. Is it easy for that employer to reach you? You know, do they know how to do it? I mean, a simple stopping in and saying, if there was a problem, do you know how to reach me? And they said, well, you did give me a card once, but I don't even know where it is. You know, so really kind of helping them be able to know how to reach you if there's an emergency. And showing an interest in you wanting to be contacted makes all the difference in the world as to whether they're going to do that or not. You know, are you pleasant to work with? You know, if you come by and you've got that smiley face and you have a good word to say, it makes all the difference in the world as to whether they continue to respond to you when you do call or stop in. Do you follow through on the commitments that you make? Do you anticipate problems that may arise and propose solutions? Those are all great questions that you could ask yourself in terms of providing good customer service. Are my proposed solutions easy to implement? Do we respond quickly when there's an issue or something that needs to be addressed? Do you invite those departments to give you that feedback? I think there's a difference between saying, how am I doing, and really meaning, how am I doing in terms of the services that I am providing you. And the more effective your questions are, the more earnest you are in terms of how you ask those questions, make all the difference in terms of whether the questions that we listed out earlier are something that they're going to give you honest answers about. Sometimes the feedback isn't make or break. Sometimes it's, you know, there's some issues, but, you know, to go into that, that's going to take a lot of time, or, you know, they may hesitate to really kind of talk to you about some of those problems. So your technique in terms of how you ask is very important in terms of whether you get honest feedback. If things go wrong, do you take ownership for that? If my partner's not happy with the service, what steps do I take to correct it? And so, you know, usually you'll get good feedback, especially if you're earnest in the way you work with and deliver services to those employers or those employees. But in fact, have you thought about, well, what happens when I do get that negative feedback or that problem does? What am I going to do? Some of these things that are in these slides are good strategies or things for you to keep in mind, so when you're confronted with that unexpected problem, you can handle it appropriately. And do they see you as a valuable resource? The only way you're going to know about all of those questions is if you ask. So, am I helping to make this a successful experience for you? What do you like about my services? These are good, probing, earnest questions that will help you get the kind of feedback that you need. How could I improve? When you're soliciting feedback from the employee, are you satisfied with are they satisfied with the performance of that employee? If not, what solutions can we work on together? What accommodations can I support? And what opportunities I have for growth? So even when everything's going swimmingly, I think it's still important to, again, remember, we're working on folks' careers, not this job. So where can this person go? If everything's good, then start those kinds of conversations about, are there some additional skills that this person could use that would benefit you? Is there a career path for this particular person? What might that look like? What would they need to know that they don't know now? Is there some training, some schooling that they could consider? So there's always a reason to get some feedback. There's always a good reason to check in. If anything, it's to help this person with their career, even when there are not problems on the job. Encourage the employer to provide frequent feedback and guidance, and model those communication strategies that you are looking for. So customer complaints, when you do get that, you are confronted, there is a problem. Listen with understanding. Don't blame. Don't make this somebody else's problem. Own it. Paraphrase. So when you hear it, listen intently. Let there be a beat. A lot of times this person's venting. And then paraphrase and come back. This is what I think I heard. Do I have it correctly? A lot of times we charge off and solve the wrong problem. We didn't listen carefully to what it is they say, because a lot of times they're gushing. They're kind of talking about everything related to that situation. You need to get at root causes. That back and forth of this is what I heard you say, do I have it correctly, really allows you to get at the right solution to the problem that the customer has. And what do they want out of it? Sometimes they don't want anything more than to be able to vent about this. Or maybe they don't think it's a solvable problem and they're venting. So again, talking this through with them, brainstorming, maybe you can help this person see a solution where they don't. When it comes to complaints, propose a solution and make sure that they support it. Give them your name and the fact that you're going to follow up, and be clear that if this isn't going the way you hoped, please contact me. And then, again, follow up with them as well, so that what you're really saying is there is a solution to this, we're working on it, and I'm keeping you informed. If you're not seeing the progress that you're looking for, contact me. This is how you can contact me. So your second field-based assignment is to do this type of activity. Conduct an employer satisfaction survey with a business that's hired an employee from your organization. If you've been placing some folks in the past, that's who I would start with. If you haven't been in a position where you have a placement that has been made, and you could go back and see how satisfied that employer is, again, check with your mentor, check with your supervisor. They can give you the name of somebody that your organization has placed, maybe that you haven't. In some cases, that can be a rich experience because they don't know you, and you're coming in and you're saying, we earnestly want to know how we are doing. Again, this isn't customer satisfaction in terms of how the employee that you place is doing. This is you and your services. And by doing this customer service satisfaction survey, you are able to reinforce the types and the quality of the services that you provide. So we want you to kind of take this opportunity to really kind of see what employers think about the services that we provide. You can use tool 4.7. And it's built into the document around this assignment, and you can use that as your form. But if your organization does have an existing customer satisfaction survey, we would encourage you to use that. When you finish conducting that survey, and we want you to do it in person if at all possible, then we want you to write that up. What kind of solutions were put in place if there was a problem? Are there any issues that they feel that need to be addressed? If they're not, what have you learned about how best to maintain this working relationship with this employer? And are there some other opportunities to work with this employer, maybe in with some other services that you have to offer, such as worksite tours, work experiences, things like that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amy to talk about a little bit more on getting to know the employer and the consultant role moving forward.
Thanks, Dale. It really is so incredibly important to maximize those customer service skills, because that can really, as you pointed out, that can be the reason, the make or break of a long-term relationship with an employer. And it's easy enough to do, and we've all had experience with good and bad customer service. So I think we understand the importance of it. Now, ultimately, the degree to which workplace accommodations are effective and fit in will depend on really how well you as an employment specialist and everybody else then knows the employee and knows how the supports affect them, and then how it can work within the workplace. So remember this slide from a previous module. These are just to remind you, again, in order to provide great customer service, in order to do all the problem solving, and in order to support all the different people you need to support, you are, again, the jack of all trades. These are all things that are part of your customer service. They're part of just getting your job done, and we've gone over these before. So with that, a lot of times you're going to need help from your coworkers. You're going to need, it'll make your job easier in all these roles if you do establish a really good rapport with your business partners and with the coworkers and make your life smoother, and with the families. So it's really important that you understand all your different roles and that you market yourself in these different roles to the right audiences. I think that's really key. So that leads us to, that's a lot of stuff to manage. It's a lot of roles that you're taking on every day. So how do you manage your job? We're going to have you read a little bit from excerpts from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And these are some of the strategies to stay on top of your job. And it's particularly important when you have a job such as an employment specialist and you're all over the place. You need to be proactive, so planning ahead, and you can only be so proactive in our job because stuff will just happen. Somebody will have an issue on a job, or someone will get lost on their way to work, even though they've been mobility trained and successful, and you have to drop everything. So keep in mind, be proactive to the extent that you can, so that when small crises do occur, it doesn't throw you off as much as it could. Begin with the end in mind. What is your ultimate goal, and work backwards. Put first things first. It's really learning to prioritize of all those roles. What do you do when? Think constantly, win-win. If you're particularly in those roles of negotiating, think about what you have to offer to a situation all the time. Seek first to understand, and that's a key part of customer service too. Understand what is their issue, what is the concern, what is causing all the problems. Because sometimes if you go beyond the panic of this is a terrible situation and go right down to the core of it, it might be a simple solution. So first try to understand what the problem is. Synergize, that's just combining everything, all of your energies and your efforts and your knowledge and your experience, and put it together to be as productive as you possibly can. And then something called sharpen the saw, which is just a way to say really focus. Focus in on what you need to do at the time that it needs to be done. So we're going to look at a quick time management matrix. And this is a way just to categorize what you do during a day. How many of your activities are important and urgent? How many times do you have crises, pressing problems, deadline-driven projects? And we can control how many activities land in there. Not always. Sometimes a crisis out of our control will happen. But if you know you have a deadline a month out and you wait till the day before, that's suddenly a crisis on that day. That's suddenly important and urgent when it could have been important and not urgent. So how do, taking a long-term view. And those important but not urgent activities are the long-range planning, or the deadlines that are, further out that we can manage over time so it's not so urgent. The relationship building, all that kind of stuff. And then the non-important but urgent activities. When somebody interrupts you, sometimes all those calls, a report that suddenly needs to be done, that wouldn't have been so important, but you let it go too far, some meetings. And then there's the not important and not urgent. A lot of busy work, a lot of the stuff that isn't as hard, and if it's not urgent, we'll tend to spend a little more time there because it's a little more relaxing. It's some of our more pleasant activities. Because they're not urgent. You don't feel stressed. But they're also not that important. So how can we spend a little bit of time in there and not spend too much time in there? It's all about how you manage your time. And when you are supporting other people, it's their time as well. So we have to keep that in mind. So assignment 4.3 is to read. Just going up to read an excerpt resource 4.10, Plain English about Information: the 7 Habits of Highly Effective Information for Professionals, Part 5. And habit number 3 is what we're focusing on, which is putting first things first. So you read that, then review the time management matrix, and there's a time management profile that we want you to take on how do you actually, where do you put those activities? Where do you spend your time? So answer the questions of the profile and complete the grid based on your time management. You're going to tally all your totals. in the grid. And it'll give you some insight into how you do spend your time. And then we're asking you to write a 1 to 2 page paper just discussing what you learned about yourself, and maybe describe some of the actions you will take to improve your self-management. Maybe what changes do you need to be made? Do you need to move some of your time into different quadrants, for instance, and how are you going to do that? And then turn that into your instructor. We'll also ask you to do activity 4.4, and this is to really highlight and figure out what it is that you do in a day in a different way. Complete a day in the life of an employment specialist case study. So we're giving you sort of a case study of things that occurs for an employment specialist. A parent called to ask why her son isn't working yet. An employer you've been pursuing for months left you a message, say she's ready to work with you. Message from the director, a supervisor call, all the stuff that comes in a day, and we're going to ask you to prioritize what it is that, how you would respond to these situations. And then develop a brief action plan for dealing with the situation. So there's an action plan chart that has you prioritize the situation, what your action steps are going to be, when you're going to do it, the resources needed, and what you expect the results to be. Which goes kind of hand in hand with the prioritizing of your time from the previous assignment. And then ultimately turn that into your instructor as well. Because it's a tough job, and we've thrown a lot of information at you. So just being able to manage it so that it's not an overwhelming job, I think, is always helpful. So in summary, we really focused a lot in this module about helping your newly hired job seeker or your new employee fit in so that they're productive and they are socially accepted, and then they can maintain that job for a longer period of time. Customizing all the supports and having a plan for your workplace supports are really key to success. Self-support through a systemic process is definitely the goal, so somebody can manage their own job eventually with a lot of natural support, and with supervisors and coworkers and the team helping. Feedback and taking the feedback from employers and making it comfortable for them to give you feedback, the new employee as well as the supervisors and the coworkers, is key to putting out all the fires early. Address all the complaints, or the issues with professionalism, with the strategies that Dale talked about. And then the key is to balance everything and avoid burnout because you're going a lot. At the end of this, we're going to ask you again, there's one more quiz. So take your quiz soon after you have reviewed this information. Take it several times if you want. Turn that into your instructor. And again, in order to fully complete this module, please go through all of the activities, go through all of the assignments, turn them all in, complete your quiz, and participate in the discussion board. We appreciate your time in listening to all 4 of these modules. Please also take advantage of the resources that are available to you with each of these modules. Lots of fact sheets, sheets of tips, lists of websites that can really support you on your job. So thank you again so much.